so long we can't pretend. Remember the way we used to move, dance all night like young lovers do. Your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, he'll get me through. When the beat's gone, you can't save me, baby.
This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Hello and welcome to Broad Radio. I'm Senelmis, and with me is the lovely Cal Wilson. Hello, Cal.
Hello. What an earworm that song is. Every time I hear it,
I know.
gets stuck.
We were just bopping.
We were, and luckily we stopped doing that before the camera came on because I feel we weren't nailing it. Well, you were nailing it. I was not nailing it.
Hey, I saw you at the Melbourne Comedy Festival last week. It was like having a warm hug. It was so nice. The next day I woke up, my cheeks were so sore
That's so lovely.
from laughing. What was it like getting back amongst the crowd?
It was amazing actually because we've done 2 years of Zoom gigs, and it's not the comedian's natural habitat. So it's so lovely to be in a room sharing a moment with people, and yeah, just the delight in being around people I hadn't met before as well, because it's been so long, it's just been the family. So yeah, and hearing people laugh together, because humour is such a connecting thing. It was a treat.
Fantastic. Now, like, speaking of things that are coming back after the bajillion lockdowns that we've had, the spoken word art salon Better Off Said, which is eulogies for the living and dead, is finally coming out of hibernation. Yay. So we'll be talking to the program's co-creator, the wonderful Marik Hardy, very shortly. Plus, a couple of other change makers will be joining us today as well. Nicholette Buller, she's an independent running in Bradfield, which is a safe Liberal seat in North Sydney. So we're going to chat to her about what it's like being in the thick of a federal election campaign. And Tanja Curcic, she's going to be joining us too. She's the Aussie founder of a little group called Little Blue Shed in Uganda. It's a place where women come to learn new skills so they can support themselves and their families. So all of that is coming up after this.
Broad Radio is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Chemist Warehouse, great savings every day.
This is Broad Radio. I'm Serpil, and with me is Cal Wilson. And if you're joining us live right now on Facebook or YouTube, please do send us your comments. Tell us what you're thinking, if you've got any questions, or maybe you just want to send Cal and I some love. That would be really lovely as well. Don't forget, you can also catch up on past episodes of this show, Broad Radio on the Go, our podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Cal, as I mentioned, I did see you at the Comedy Festival last week. And one thing that you mentioned was your time on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And I loved how you said, like, you just resisted being on that show for such a long time. But then the pandemic hit, and your words, not mine. I think you said something along the lines of, I'm a celebrity, Get me anything.
Yeah. But that's exactly what it was. It was like, the work had vanished and then we'd been in lockdown for so long. And I've always turned it down in the past when they've asked. And then I was like, well, why not? If everything is terrible right now, why not make it a little bit worse? And then I loved it. I had a great time. And I made all of these new friends, which was something I wasn't expecting to come away with. And we were talking before about how weird it is as adults. It's not as easy as when you're a kid to make new friends. Like, you can't sort of just go up to someone and go, do you want to play?
Absolutely. And, one of the things that you mentioned in your show was, you had to do some yucky things like eating cockroaches. But in between that, you found you had a win. You had this strong friendship that you made with the bubbly and lovely Poe, which, you know, we've all come to love and know her through the early days of MasterChef. Of course, she's done a whole heap of things since then. And you've struck up this friendship, which is, you know, it's not a usual thing to do, don't you think, in adulthood?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a lot harder as an adult to make friends. And I feel so fortunate that we did have that time in the so-called juggle together to make friends. And Poe and I just hit it off, and I stayed with her in Adelaide over the Fringe Festival. It was so nice to be inside wearing normal clothes on furniture, because up to that point we'd only hung out on a log in the bush. Like, it was lovely to reestablish that. And really, thinking about it, like the friends that I've made up until that point as an adult have been other parents, because your kids do the same thing together and you get to know the other parents. But we had this experience where we met this couple from one of the sports teams that my son plays for, got on like a house on fire, really hit it off. And then about a year into the friendship, discovered they were really racist. And so...
Hang on. Backtrack. So you'd known these people for a year.
So long.
And they came out of the closet as racist.
Well, I think it was because we were on Facebook with them, and there was just a little bit of espousing of Corey Bernardi. And then there was the speech in Melbourne where the neo-Nazis spoke, and there was like a post about how great they were, sort of thing, and we were like, oh, we just have to not be friends anymore, because you assume that people that you hang out with and like will have the same kind of values system as you, but then we were like, oh, we have to.
So how do you test that? It's an interesting thing that you say, because, you know, when you're younger, you test a lot of friendships, right? But, you know, particularly in your early 20s, you sort of, I don't know, you hang out with someone like really through intense periods, and then suddenly you realise, well, actually we've got nothing in common anymore, and you sort of find someone else in your life. But in adulthood, you tend to be a bit more discerning. So how do you navigate that? Do you have like a checklist of things that you go through for what qualifies as a friend?
I feel like we should now, like having been burnt by that, we should. I guess you find out pretty quickly, even talking about COVID, like you find out pretty quickly if like someone's an anti-vaxxer and I'm quite pro-vaccines, like that would probably prevent our friendship from going further. But like I was saying, I've mostly met people through my son because our kids do the same things together. How have you made friends as an adult?
Well, it's interesting. I moved here as an adult from Perth, so here being Melbourne, and I actually found it difficult to make friends, because I find that you're a little bit more adventurous when you're in your 20s, and you're sort of in your 30s, it's a bit like, I'm not sure. And also, people's dance cards are full, so they've already got their circle of friends, so trying to wedge yourself into that friendship group. So I ended up doing some crazy things, like I'd go to this store that I really loved to buy clothes, and the owner of the store was just lovely, and we just struck up these conversations that were really interesting. So I just, you know, sidle up to her, "How you doing?" You know, and we became really good friends. And you know, I ended up flying to Tokyo with her for her milestone birthday, which I'd never done with friends I'd had for you know a bajillion years. And we're still friends to this day. And I think it's just because we made each other laugh. We sort of, you know, had common values, as you said. I have not discovered that she's a racist, thank goodness.
That's great.
Tick, tick, tick. And we just also enjoy being in each other's company, where, you know, if the person can come to your house and lie on your couch and take off their shoes and treat it as if they're home, their own home, you know that you're onto a winner with that friendship.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Yesterday I had a friend come around for brunch, and it was so nice that she was comfortable enough in our house rather than like meeting in a cafe and stuff. So we could just like, I figured that I had this thought yesterday actually, that I know that we are really good friends because I answered the door in my Ugg boots. Like I didn't need to change my footwear to look like they were respectable. I was like, Kelly knows me well enough to see my Ugg boots. Like it was just a nice little measurement of, oh yeah, we're all comfortable here.
Absolutely. We've got a question, Cal, here. The person says, this is from Karen Crombie. She says, "Hi Cal, love seeing you a few times at the Moth in Melbourne. My question, what about when you make friends with parents and then the kids fall out?"
That's tricky too. That's really tricky too. I haven't had that situation, but I've got friends that are in that situation where the two daughters do not get on, but the mums love each other. And that's a tricky one as well. I think they've kind of grown out of it. Like, as the kids have got older, I mean, that's not a strategy, but yeah, it's definitely tricky because you kind of have to, well, if Daisy doesn't want to hang out with Amelia, then you just have to kind of accept that, I think.
I think so too. You can just always say, like, we're having mummy time and don't take the kids along.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean...
Meet in a bar. That's what you should do.
Hey, we should probably introduce our next guest, but you can tell us on Facebook or YouTube how you've met your adult friend. We'd love to hear. We'll keep reading your messages. That would be fantastic. But our next guest is the wonderful Marik Hardy. Now, Marik is many, many things. She is a book and screenwriter. You'll be familiar with shows that she's penned, like ABC TV's Laid or episodes of Packed to the Rafters. She's also the former artistic director of the Melbourne Writers Festival. Marik is also a broadcaster. In fact, she was one of my Triple J colleagues from many, many moons ago. We probably had a bit more collagen back in our skin then. You'll know her probably as the co-creator of the international literary phenomenon Women of Letters, and now she's created Better Off Said, Eulogies for the Living and Dead. It's an afternoon of words, thoughts and reflections for the living and dead. Basically, each month a group of guests are invited. 3 guests are invited to speak to the phrase, I wish I had said, and then one special guest delivers our living eulogy to someone or something still of this earth. And that on the 1st of May, that's next weekend, you'll be hearing one of our favourites on Broad Radio, Denise Scott. So Scotty is on the lineup. My own literary crush, the lovely writer Alice Pung, as well as astronomer Alan Duffy. So it's a real great lineup, but let's say hi to Marik so she can tell us more. Hello, Marik.
Hi, adult friends. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Hey, have you made an adult friend?
Oh, yeah, I make adult friends. I love making new friends. I'm a new friend junkie. It's great. I fall in love. I'm very romantic, so I fall in love fast, and that includes friendship love as well. So you get really enamored of people. Although you know how New Year's Eve usually it's you make a resolution. But this year and on New Year's Eve, we decided to pick a word or a phrase to commit to, because I'd had other friends say in other years they'd pick the word brave for a year or something. But this year I picked an intention to commit to my chosen family. So to make sure that I kept fostering and building the relationships of people who were not my blood family, who I'm not close to, but my chosen family, because they are my integral foundational relationships, just to make sure that I looked out for them and it wasn't just getting enamored with all the new people, which I do very easily, but really making sure I embed those relationships that are familiar in here. They are the familiar, but not blood family. So there you go. I've started out, Ernest. That's where I always go. Sorry.
I love that, Marik. It's so much better than making those, resolutions that last all of 2 weeks. I'm going to eat less or I'm going to exercise more. It's such a meaningful resolution. I love it.
Yeah, and we always write a letter to the year prior and set it on fire at midnight as well. So you can do. I'm a fan of the symbolism, like letting some shit go. So you write a letter. You're like, thank you, year. Thank you for the grief. Thank you for meeting that person and that thing that didn't work. And then like putting a match to it at midnight and setting it on fire, and that kind of symbolism I think is important.
Hey, let's talk about Better Off Said. One of the things that the pandemic has reminded us is, we're all going to die, right? But it's also reminded us that it's been a time of reflection. A lot of us have sat back, re-examined our lives to go, what is life all about? And so I guess in terms of doing that, do you think we should all be embracing that idea of speaking our minds, of that idea of living eulogies?
Well, I mean, Emily Zoe Baker, who is my co-curator, and I, we created this event in 2019, November 2019. There she is, beautiful Emily, in the very ambitious style of live events there that we thought were going to go on forever. So it was a monthly event. We started in November 2019. We did 3 shows, March 2020, we stopped doing shows for obvious reasons. In 2021, we're back, here we come, monthly events. And we did one show. And so it feels like a real genuine privilege to now we've done, where this Sunday, May 1st show that's upcoming is going to be our third show in 3 months. And, I'm curating the June show currently and the July show. So, and Cal, as you would know from Comedy Festival, I just do not take being back in the Alive event space for granted. I feel so lucky and so excited that we're here again. Every time I'm in a room with people who are laughing together or feeling something together and watching our beautiful performers take the stages that were denied to them for so long without any support, I just think, look at us, we're here. I want to kind of drink this moment up, which does speak to we're all going to die, which we should be drinking up all these moments at every point in our lives going, everything is finite, nothing is certain. So how amazing that we're on a Zoom together talking and you've got amazing pattern clothes on. And I just think that was the point of the show that we started in 2019. It's like, how do you say things before they're too late? How do you tell people you love them? Because we would all have had an experience where someone or something was taken from our lives before we were ready. And we just think, gosh, I wish that they knew that I was sorry or I was grateful or that I loved them. So that was really the key behind this show, is putting that space there for readers to have that catharsis, to say things before they're too late. Which doesn't mean you always should say everything, because sometimes that can really hurt people. It's not like you're like, oh, to hell with it, rah, you're going to hear my truth now. I don't think that's the intention. And I've had to find some closure with some people that doesn't always involve me connecting with them. I think you can write these things down and it doesn't always have to go to the person. They don't have to always hold your hurt or pain. But really that was the intention. And look, it was never our intention when we created the show to have people kind of unzip their chests on our stages, but the shows that we've done, it's really used as a place of catharsis, and we're really conscious and grateful that our readers are so emotionally honest, that people in the room are so respectful and beautiful, and that it does feel like a safe place for everyone to kind of talk these things through.
I love that idea of just saying what you need to say before it's too late. And I immediately had a couple of things that I was like, oh, I could absolutely talk about that in your format, because it just speaks to that feeling of connection and then the regret that you feel if you don't say the thing. Has there been any really unexpected kind of stories of regret that are kind of out of the box, or are they all just fascinating and you don't know where they've come from, sort of thing?
Do you mean in the show?
In the show, yeah.
Or in my life?
Either, both.
In the show, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we record the shows except if an artist says that they don't want something recording. And someone once spoke at a show, and I'm not going to make it public because they chose not to record, but they chose to disclose that they had suffered abuse as a child, and it was the first time they ever felt they wanted to speak it. They wanted to air it in this space. And there was this beautiful moment where they said to the crowd, please don't tell anyone. And I'm like, what an amazing sense of trust to be in a room of 200 people and share this thing as a public figure, and then trust that we would all keep it. And I think that sense of trust is with good reason. I think everyone did hold it that day. And that was a revelation that I did not clearly expect. And we have a duty of care for those people. I've made sure I check in on them consistently and that it felt okay for them to share it and disclose it in that space. But when we give our readers the brief, so the premise of the show is 4 readers do the words I wish I'd said. That's the brief we give them. And in this upcoming show, as you said, it's Denise Scott, Professor Alan Duffy, Swoon, Georgia Mack, who is the front woman from Can't Cope, and Alice Pung. And then we have a break, and then we ask someone to deliver the living eulogy. And the amazing Tony Birch is going to deliver the living eulogy at this show. And then we have a musical act. In this case, it's Stav. So it's really interesting. The living eulogy has been taken to some really different places. Lou Bennett at our first show eulogised the Jabberung birthing tree. Jan Fran at our second show eulogised, perhaps slightly prematurely, Scott Morrison's career, although fingers crossed, coming up. And we had Clementine Ford did our last show and eulogised a house that she moved out of after being in lockdown in it for so long, and just all the pain and grief but beauty and growing that her and her son did in that space. And it was the first space she was in after she separated from her son's father. So it was just, so that's the brief. We just say eulogize someone or something, and they're the kind of things that people take in that space. So I kind of love that it's broad enough that people can be really emotionally truthful. They can choose something symbolic, something important to them, something political. So you never quite know what you're going to get in a show, and that's the joy of it and being in the room.
And it sounds like the audience recognise that they're being given a gift by the person speaking, like that there is this, because people's stories are fantastic, and even if it feels like a tiny story, it still resonates with everyone.
And you would know, Cal, from doing Women of Letters as well. Like I genuinely respect that space. Like I know I'm going to die. So you go, what can I put into the world that is meaningful, that is not self-serving? I'm not on the stage at Better Off Said. I wasn't on the stage at Women of Letters. I do front of house. I curate these shows. I have a very strong intention, and so does Emily, to create a space where, someone gets up on stage and people in the audience go, well, I know that person. That's a famous person. That's a famous person from the telly. And then that famous person talks about, the death of a parent. And people in the audience go, well, that's how I felt when my parent died. And there's a moment of beautiful empathy and connection, and all of us understanding that we are living this shared human experience, shared grief, shared pain, shared joy, shared connection, until we're not anymore. And so there is a really strong intention for all of us in that room to understand that, for want of a better phrase, we are in this together, and that when you can hold that space for someone and understand their experience, then it's a richer way to be alive.
Hey, Marik, Edja Chelishkin has just written in and she said, Better Off Said is just the best. Marik is so good at curating these types of events. What a Melbourne treasure she is. There you go.
Oh, that's so kind. That made me feel a little bit teary. Sorry. And words of affirmation is my love language. So like straight into the chest, that one.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Hey, now the word eulogy originates from the Greek word eulogia, which means true words of praise. Eulogies, of course, by their very nature, are supposed to be about, keeping a person's legacy alive, sharing stories and memories, and celebrating the life of a deceased one. So would you say the living eulogy has that sort of same sentiment behind it?
I think so, although, specifically, we ask the living eulogist to eulogize someone or something that is still with us. And again, another, Kate Kennedy, who is a wonderful writer and a real hero of mine, eulogized at a show. It was the one show we did in 2021, and she eulogized singing in groups, because at that stage, no one was allowed to sing together. No one was allowed to be in the room and sing together. And it was this beautiful, that's something that isn't dead, and it's not a person, but it was that sense of just eulogizing, of sitting and recognizing something and paying tribute to it, specifically before it's too late, is our intention. Whereas often eulogies are used to, like you said, commemorate, celebrate something that is no longer with us. But what does it look like if you say those things now and we take a moment to say, oh my goodness, that thing or that person is still here? And the wonderful Luke McGregor did our show a couple of months ago, and he wasn't doing the living eulogy. He did the words I wish I'd said, but he said, it's the words I wish I'd said to my dad. And he said, he's still alive. I just don't say these things very often, and this is probably what I'd want to say at his eulogy, but I hope I get the bravery to say it to him in real life. And so any opportunity that gives us all the chance to reflect on that, to think of the people, Cal, like you said, straight away you were like, oh, I know a couple of things that I would talk about. I lost a beautiful friend in 2020 suddenly during the pandemic, and had to watch his funeral on Zoom and do all those things that so many of us have had to do. And it did give me a big reset to say, who do I need to clear things with in my life? If someone was looking at my coffin, or if I'm looking at someone else's coffin, who are some people that I just want to get some I'm sorry and thank you and goodbyes with? And I wrote 2 letters after that funeral that felt like I needed to close something from my heart. And I think we should all think about that. I'm sure anyone listening to this knows straight away at least one person going, oh, I should say sorry or thank you or I forgive you or whatever it is. I say those are the things that you should say, because you never know when you're going to lose that person, and what a sad thing to not know or never say.
And it's so true, Marik, because, one of the things that a palliative care nurse found was that she actually collected what the the 5 regrets. The top 5 regrets people had were when they were about to pass away. And on top of the list, number 3 was, I wish I'd had the courage to express myself. So, you're giving people an opportunity to do something that won't become their top 5 regret when, they're about to shuffle off this mortal coil. So, it's a great thing that you've burst into the world, and we thank you for it. It's been really great to chat to you. Now, if you're in Melbourne, you can head along to a session of Better Off Said next weekend. That's Sunday, the 1st of May. It kicks off at 5 o'clock at the Brunswick Ballroom on Sydney Road. All the details are on betteroffsaid.com.au. Now, next up, we'll be meeting independent candidate Nicholette Buller, who's in the thick of an election campaign. More Broad Radio after this. This is Broad Radio. I'm Serpil, and with me is Cal Wilson. Now, joining us from Sydney right now is Nicholette Buller. She is an independent candidate for Bradfield, a safe Liberal seat, I should say, in North Sydney. Now, Nicolette has lived in the Bradfield electorate for 41 of her 51 years. She was educated there, she worked there, she's raising her family there. Nicolette's been endorsed by the Voices of Bradfield and is running a campaign focused on climate action, responsible forward-thinking economic decisions, restoring integrity in politics, and looking after each other, because that's what Australians do. Hello, Nicolette.
Hello, Serpil. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining Cal and I. Now, I want to kick off with, in the words of our former Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, there's never been a more exciting time to be alive, especially if you're a independent candidate. Now, there seems to be a real disillusionment with the old model of politics. Our two major parties, the support for our two major parties are at an all-time low. And with that, what we've seen is this real large female push to shake things up. And you've joined that group of, females who are trying to shake things up. Why did you throw your hat in the political ring, especially when you're, in a safe Liberal seat?
Okay, just as a point of clarity, in a vibrant democracy, there is no such thing as a safe Liberal, Labor or anything seat. So that's the exciting part of it. Why did I throw my hat in the ring? It's a really good question. I don't know how much time you have, but I can say that with my background in climate policy, clean energy and in sustainability, I had spent much of my career working in public policy, also in and around Canberra too, such as at the Climate Institute, the Australian Conservation Foundation, and for organisations that were really pushing for better representation of environmental and social values into policy making at a federal level. We weren't getting it. And I have to say that once we had Kevin Rudd was our Prime Minister, I really thought after the apology to our first Australians that we would get action on climate. And we didn't. And I have to be quite honest, and I think there was a part of me that died that day when the Labor government of the day didn't commit enough to an international agreement on climate. And I slinked away and started a career in the financial markets because I didn't have to be subject to the whims of what a marginal electorate may or may not want for a particular election. You could get some really good decisions without ideology made. And so the big question is, why did I start running? Well, I was part of the Great Resignation. I had actually sort of hung up after a decade in finance just to take a pause and to catch up on some reading and do some stretching, if you like. My daughter's doing her final year at year 12 this year as well. And it was a combination of a few things, particularly meeting the current member of parliament in the street. And to his credit, he's never really pretended to care about climate change. And on this occasion, it was no different. And I just went, no wonder I've disengaged from politics, because the parties just aren't getting done the really important, and of course they're hard sometimes, but there's some really obvious things that we need done, like bold, urgent, meaningful action on climate, and particularly getting a federal IBAC or ICAC, an independent anti-corruption commission, in at a federal level. So this is sort of part of why I decided to run. There are many other reasons, like my 20-year-old voting for the first time, but I just want an Australian Parliament full of leaders, or at least a few leaders that I'm immensely proud of, that know where they're taking our nation, and they're not scared of a genuine contest of ideas, that they don't have to drip everything in ideology, but can actually tell us where we're going and why, and take everybody along with us. So that's some of the reasons why I've decided to throw my hat in the ring and give the people of Bradfield a choice, something different.
Do you think climate is going to be a real sticking point in this election? I mean, we just had the, COP26, and we didn't look so good on the international stage. Australia, it was a little bit embarrassing what Australia had to offer on the international stage. And just recently with the budget, there wasn't a lot of money thrown for climate action. Do you think Australians have taken note of that, and will that be a sticking point this election?
So I can tell you what I've heard in the hustings or on the stump around my upper North Sydney electorate of Bradfield, and that is that, people actually are saying enough's enough. They're really frustrated that the Liberal Party in particular, which is quite diverse, but it just seems to have been held hostage to the interests of Barnaby Joyce and the National Party. And there's just been no action on it. So I'm hearing, particularly from the seniors in our electorate, that they want to be able to hand the planet on to their kids and their grandkids in a way that is at least not as, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's getting better. It's starting to heal the planet. And that's ringing out loud and clear. There's also a really strong, probably more a male group in the sort of the 40s to 60s that are just frustrated that we haven't pivoted our economy onto 21st century solutions, such as in clean energy and things like electric vehicles, that we're still using taxpayers' money to subsidise fossil fuels and sort of industries of the past. It's not putting us in a great position to be and remain internationally competitive with other countries around the world that have all taken these 2050 and indeed 2030 and 2035 commitments on climate. So, on the basis of doing the right thing for our kids' futures and also about the economy and jobs, absolutely, climate is going to be one of the 3 or top 4 issues, particularly in my electorate for this election.
So you mentioned just before you've got a 20-year-old who's voting for the first time. Have they said what is important to them? I'm assuming they're going to vote for their mum, but are they? What are they particularly concerned about?
Yeah, so my son, he's particularly concerned about reconciliation with our First Australians. He did Aboriginal studies for his at high school, and he's moved in to become a professional football coach. And for everybody around Australia, that's a round ball, the soccer. And so it's interesting, but he just sees, he finds it really difficult to look forward as a nation if we haven't really had some honest conversations about from where we've come. And I'm actually quite proud about the lens as a relatively privileged white male and affluent as well, that he's able to put that lens on and look around and see the prism through which he sees things. And I think having done his Aboriginal studies and more recently just travelled, he realises the absolute importance about truth-telling, storytelling, listening. And I think he would sincerely love policies that respect and recognise First Australians, probably in our Constitution, if that's what they want, and also to include First Australians much more in public policy making and representation in Australian Parliament. So that's the thing that matters to him.
Nicolette, speaking of young people, a really interesting thing happened in Victoria this week. So one of our former Liberal premiers, Ted Baillieu, his son Rob came out this week and publicly rejected the Liberal Party and he threw his support behind Monique Ryan, who's actually the independent candidate attempting to unseat Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg. So he wrote an opinion piece, Rob did, and in it he said that good people would take action on climate change, they would protect the rights of LGBT people, they'd support an anti-corruption commission. So do you think young people like Rob and your son are going to make a significant impact on the next election result? What are you hearing from them? What do they want for their future?
That's a really good question, and I wish I had a more helpful answer, except that there is definitely, which is really exciting, and maybe because I have a son in that age group, but I'm hearing for the first time in a long time that young people are re-engaging on politics, which is absolutely fantastic, because frankly they probably should have 2.5 times the vote for somebody possibly later on in life, because they're going to have to spend longer living on the planet than those who've already had a great term. I think they will deep though about some of the capture that we have. Clive Palmer's United Australia Party is spending literally tens of millions of dollars on social media, targeting that first-time voter age group in particular. And I can say it's having an impact, particularly in my electorate. So it's not clean and cut in terms of whether that group will make a difference, but if only at least that group is starting to re-engage, ask questions and have a look, are the major parties getting it done? Do we have housing affordability? Why do I start my career and I have HECS debts that are up to my eyeballs? There are many serious issues, particularly climate change, that we're just pushing onto the next generation. And I can understand why they're going to be re-engaging and saying, yeah, that's not okay anymore. So in that respect, it's really positive.
Just very quickly, Nick, since Federation, fewer than 50 independent candidates have been elected to the lower house. Less than a dozen have sat in the Senate. If politics is about electing the people that are right for us, backing the right policies to improve our lives, what do independents have to offer the average Australian?
Oh, something different. Because if you vote the status quo, you're going to get the status quo. Yeah, you're going to get the same. So and I haven't really looked over the fence very much at other independents, to be honest, because it's head down and working hard here to gain traction and meeting people here in Bradfield. But certainly I'm seeing a whole lot of very experienced people, particularly when I say people and the high-profile independents are men and women, but these women are, they've got real-world experience. They're not career politicians. And I just came off a Zoom with Monique Ryan and Despi O'Connor, both from Victoria, and we got to imagine what the future might be. And with my experience in economy and climate change and accountability, and Monique's in public health, and Despi's, for example, in local government and education and sustainability, suddenly I realised, wow, imagine if we had all of these people with real world experience, for real stories, and connected with their communities in the parliament, just how much more diverse and rich policy making would be. And I think particularly women have, it's a generalisation, but have a different style to engaging, to listening, collaborating. They're more likely to want to find common ground and work hard on the policy aspects rather than just the ideology around things. So I think independents, particularly, I'll talk for myself, I know I'm a great choice. and I think a lot of people are really excited about having the opportunity at least to have something different, because what's happening at the moment is both parties are not getting the job done.
Thank you for your time, Nicolette.
Thanks so much for having me. It's and I love listening to Marieke before. It's just wonderful. Thank you so much for Broad Radio.
Thank you. That's independent candidate for Bradfield, Nicholette Buller, a safe Liberal seat in North Sydney. Coming up, we'll find out what Little Blue Shed is all about.
Australia's harsh sun is proven to visibly age women by up to 20 years faster than those in the US. That's why you need sunscreen every day. Ask your Chemist Warehouse pharmacist which sunscreen is right for your skin.
Broad Radio. Talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis? We've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Yes, you are on Broad Radio. I'm Serpil Senelmis with Cal Wilson. Now, Cal, I did say you headed off to the comedy festival.
Mm-hmm.
I came to see you at the comedy festival, but you actually have also done something super, super exciting other than going back on stage and being amongst people. You went to the BAFTAs.
I went to the BAFTAs. It was very exciting. I'm not going to say anything more. Imagine that did that, just left it like just showing off I went to the BAFTAs. So Rebel Wilson was hosting the BAFTAs in the UK and I wrote some jokes for her. And then kind of last minute she went, do you want to come and be here for the BAFTAs? Like we can do some more sort of workshopping and stuff. So I got to be backstage at the BAFTAs and like I love being backstage. Like I love seeing the gaffer tape and the foam and the like just the backstage stuff that's not the glamour out front.
The vibe.
Seeing how much work goes into an awards ceremony. Like there just it seemed like hundreds of floor managers running around with their little headsets on, like wrangling people, wrangling the presenters, wrangling the BAFTA awards, all that sort of stuff that you don't see from out the front. You just see the polished end result, but I love seeing all the nuts and bolts backstage.
Because usually you see the one person, like you said, that polished one person wearing a designer outfit, but there's a whole machine that goes on behind it.
Totally. So there's a team of writers for any award show or any big event. There's a team of writers usually, and then there's there's the person, the stylist, there's the camera people, there's the I don't know what you call this role, but the person that goes around and puts like sticks with the photos of famous people on the seats so that when you do the rehearsal, you can see where everybody is sitting because you might want to refer to Lady Gaga. So she's in that seat there. Like all of the stuff. Look, we got to watch Dame Shirley Bassey rehearse the day before in the auditorium. And
Amazing.
That was huge. Like, and I absolutely love that I got to see her in her plain clothes with an orchestra talking through what was going to happen and then belting out Diamonds Are Forever as if she was 50 years younger than she is. Like I just love the backstage privilege of seeing what it's like the back side of an embroidery. Like the picture is beautiful, but on the other side I love seeing all the threads and the work that's gone into it.
And how long ago were you there?
A month ago.
About a month ago. And you said you wrote jokes for Rebel Wilson. I know, having worked with comedians before, I worked with a couple of comedians who would write jokes for Rove Live, if people remember that show. And they would get so excited if their joke made it on air. And they actually had a scorecard. They had this little book where they were like, yep, 5 jokes this tonight.
Yep.
Does that happen to you? Do you get really excited when you see someone else actually delivering one of your jokes coming out of their mouth?
Totally. So I have a thing with my friends at the comedy festival where I love going to watch a friend's show and then giving them lines, like going, oh, you could add another joke to that little bit that you're talking about. But for me, backstage at the BAFTAs, standing about a metre away from RuPaul and hearing him laugh at a joke that I had written, I was like, oh, this is just the best moment. It was such a... Like in a series of highlights, that was a big highlight.
And is it weird when like a famous person like Rebel is delivering lines that you've written and hearing your words coming out of someone's mouth?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too because like Rebel has a really distinct persona and personality, and it's really interesting writing for someone else who has a different sort of voice than you do. So there are things that I would write for her that would not have worked coming from me, but it's a great feeling to give her a line that she feels is quite rebel, and then to hear the audience respond to that, it's what a treat.
And how do you workshop that, Cal? Because I know, like, I've written for radio presenters previously, and over time you get to learn their speech patterns and their mannerisms, or the way they use some quirky words that you never would yourself. But when you're working with someone in like short bursts of time, how do you nail that?
Oh, you just throw everything at her. Like, I just give her pages of things, and maybe like 3 would stick. And then there's also the thing of, like, what you write down on the page might be really funny read, but out loud doesn't work. So there might be something that written down doesn't sound like it's going to get much, but when, like, you say it out loud, you discover it's really funny. It's in the delivery, or the way in which it's in which it's said. So it's like alchemy, like sort of pouring things together and finding out what's going to ignite, I guess.
I love the creative process, and thank you for giving us a little bit of an insight into the magic of the backstage. We should introduce our next guest and find out what the Little Blue Shed is all about. So we are about to meet our guest, Tanja Curcic, after this. This is Broad Radio. I'm Serpil, Senelmis, and with me is Cal Wilson, and joining us right now is Tanja Curcic. She's the founder of Little Blue Shed, a collective of women in Uganda who create pieces, one-off pieces, using recycled and or repurposed local materials. Now, it actually gives the women an opportunity to grow their entrepreneurship skills and their leadership skills. But let's get to know more about Little Blue Shed and Tanja and how this all came about. Hello, Tanja.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, tell us a little bit about your story. I understand you visited Uganda in 2010. And then
Yes.
something happened. You left your corporate job, your 9 to 5. You got yourself a one-way ticket, and you were out of here. Why?
Yeah. So it started actually a little bit before that in 2007. I went over to visit my sponsor kid in Kenya, and I had a corporate job at the time, and he asked me to come over, and I love traveling. So each year I would book 4 to 6 weeks somewhere. And so I checked with my boss. I booked my holiday for 6 weeks to Kenya to meet my sponsor child. And when I got to Kenya, although I had traveled to other, I guess, developing countries, nothing struck me as the level of poverty that I saw in Kenya. And I just remember being in a vehicle, and next to me was a man kind of pulling this cart, and I was in a car looking out the window, and his feet were bleeding. And I just that image stuck in my head. And I felt like, oh my goodness, how come, he gets to have that life and I get to have this life? And it was just a moment in time where I had this massive realization about how blessed we are. And that 2-month trip in 2007 led to me coming back and really having a stirring in my spirit about what's important. So I really had to question, is working at a corporate job what I want to do for the rest of my life? Is there something I can use my skills and talents for that would help others in the world? So I went off and did the TESOL, teaching English as a second language. And I thought, okay, this is the plan. I'm going to go back and rent out a little building and teach kids in there for free. So for the next year or two, I saved money, and then I quit my job. And then in 2010, I got the one-way ticket over to teach kids. But actually what happened, I started the Blue Shed project, which indirectly helps the kids because the mothers can then pay for their school fees. So that's how it ignited my flame to kind of step out of the norm and do something very different. I spent the first year there, and that's where I set up the Little Blue Shed.
That's quite brave, because what you're doing is you're leaving it's a bit like, flying out of a plane without a parachute. You're leaving the comfort of your home. You're going into a culture where you don't necessarily know the language or the customs or what happens in that country. And I've seen this happen through people's own migrant experiences. My own parents have been through this. What was that experience like for you? I mean, it's nice to have these idealistic, notions to save the world and make a better place. But what was that journey like for you?
Look, I think the first time was 2 months, and then the second time was 1 year in 2010. And then in 2015, I decided to go and live there full time. So it came in stages. And I think for that big transition, you need to be prepared emotionally and spiritually. So I felt that it was a lead up from 2007 to 2015. I was living in the village and collecting water from the borehole and, getting the wood for the fire and living with the community. That was my first 3 years there, to understand what is it in the community that people are needing and how can I apply my gifts and talents to be able to help. So the first 3 years were pretty tough, but it's just, I mean, I always loved putting a backpack on and traveling all the way through Europe for a year just with my backpack. So I think it's also a personality thing.
And what was the reception that you got from the people that you were living with and working with? Were they suspicious of you for a start, or did they embrace you with open arms?
Yeah, look, I think there has to be trust because, there has been a lot done to Africa in terms of, exploiting and things like that. So I just basically became a part of the community and living with them, where I sat on the floor with the women and collected the firewood and the water, built that trust. So I can't say how everybody feels, but they often tell me that I'm a blessing to them, and they're so happy that I'm here. And I try not to interfere culturally, and that's a part of what the Little Blue Shed does. We just set the platform and then allow other women to express their talents and their gifts that they've probably had bottled up for years and years. So this is a platform also that we do counselling. There's a lot of women that have been through trauma. There's a lot of polygamy, so being married to having 2 or 3 other wives in the home. So it's just a safe place to learn and create and ultimately get skills for women that haven't had the chance and make an income, so they are financially equipped to be able to look after their families, buy medicine, pay school fees, and just be empowered like we are here in Australia.
Tanya, what sort of skills are the women involved in the Little Blue Shed learning, and how is that translating into an income to support themselves or their families?
Yeah, so what I like to do is give a choice because I don't think everybody likes just tailoring or, jewelry or shoemaking. So what I usually do in the training is I do 5 trainings. So it can be baking, it can be shoemaking, it can be tailoring, it can be jewelry making. And then once they've completed that 5 skills, I leave it up to the women and the girls to decide which one best fits them. We try and source all our materials from local sources to keep the resources within Africa, within Uganda, and we make a lot of our necklaces. If you jump online, you'll see are made from repurposed calendar paper. So the idea is, we care about people and we also care about the planet. So it helps them because once they've passed the training period and they've decided in which product range they want to fit in, then they get employed and then they start making the items like the necklaces, the shoes. We're going to move into fashion items such as dresses and skirts that will have a bit of an African and contemporary twist to it. So we're expanding and learning as we go.
And what impact does it have? Like you talk about empowering women and working with women. What impact does that have on the wider community?
Well, on the wider community, it has kids going to school is a big plus because we have a lot of youth that can't, or children that can't go to school because there's no school fees. So you'll probably often hear, can you donate here for school fees? And so I kind of think, let's take the power back and pay school fees within the community. And so that has an impact because there's not kids that are unemployed that then turn to alcoholism or theft to survive. So it's just, there's a second part of the program, which is now going to be the Little Blue Shed for women and something along the lines of the men's shed, which now currently make My Little Blue Shed merchandise stands, where the men will be actively participant in carpentry skills. So looking at the wider community, getting men and women and youth involved so it can be a more vibrant and sustainable community, and empowered that they can pay their own school fees, that they don't have to keep asking Westerners for, and donations can go at any time. We saw through COVID, a lot of people got cut off from work. That meant that any support that was going overseas didn't get there. So it can end any time, and I've seen that happen on a number of occasions.
So paint us a picture of, how many women are involved? Do they have a say in what happens in Little Blue Shed? Who's the market? How big is the market? Where do these products end up?
Okay, so basically COVID put a big stop on our work for the past 2 years, and I've come back to revitalise. Up until now, there's probably been 100 to 150 women that are impacted as I was selling in markets and festivals. And I did it as a volunteer basis in the beginning, but now it's turned into, people love the product. So now I'm going to be marketing it and having an online shop and employing more people. So I think this visit to Australia has really ramped things up. But I have women leaders and I deal with women leaders. So I guess you could call me a bit of a visionary setup person, and then I place local ladies that I know have the skill set and the desire to then work with the women groups, but I'm actively involved in as well.
So, Tanya, I'm wearing an African dress today, actually. So,
yes,
this was actually made in I'm told, a little Nigerian village. I bought it from an African Australian designer. Is that one way Westerners can support people in Africa by buying product that is actually sourced from Africa?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, a lot of the times when I'm selling at different venues or I go and talk to women's groups, they always ask, how can we help? And, as much as a donation is very nice, it's not sustainable, as I was saying before. So using those skills and then having ladies go to, or men, because, you can buy that special gift for your wife or your daughter, come to the website and buy. So one of the things that when I was doing my, vision and the structure of Little Blue Shed is that we would love people to love the products and then find out the story, because I don't want it to be a woe is me, poor Africa type of buy. So that's how we've kind of structured it. So we're coming up with product development and product ideas that are going to be useful to Western women, and as well as knowing where it comes from. That's kind of the vision and the mission for the Little Blue Shed. So yes, going online and buying products when those special days come up, like Mother's Day, which is just around the corner, or a special birthday, jumping online for not-for-profit organisations or sustainable and ethical fashion organisations would definitely be the way to sustain and help.
And can you tell us a little bit about the Big Sister, Little Sister program that you've got?
Yeah, okay. So this was in response to Australian women asking how they can help. And I thought, women all over the world have pretty much the same challenges, but just different because we come from different countries. So, the Little Blue Shed logo is a dark lady and a white lady with their heads together, and it's uniting women worldwide. And so really formed to come up with a membership program, and that's called the Little Blue Shed Sisterhood Club. You can become a little sister for $60 a year, or you can become a big sister at $120 a year, and that 50% goes to menstruation products and girly items for the girls in the village. We have a big problem with the young girls that their parents can't afford their sanitary items, so they go to a man to supply those, and then that man obviously wants something in return, and this is where a lot of teenage pregnancies go. So by becoming a member, 50% goes to catering for those menstrual items. You'll get one of these Little Blue Shed Unite necklaces, which are made from recycled calendar paper, and you'll get a card, which is a Sisterhood Club card. And I'd like to develop that project further, where we can talk cross-culturally about what are the challenges, and just use it as a platform to really unite women and discuss issues and challenges that come up.
Hey, Tanya, it's been so lovely chatting to you. Good luck with the Little Blue Shed. I hope it continues to prosper and grow.
Thank you.
And that's Tanja Curcic. Now, you can check out the Little Blue Shed, and if you want to get involved, just head to littleblueshed.info. That's littleblueshed.info. Cal, that's a wrap for us.
What?
Yeah. What did you learn from the show today?
I learned how to pronounce your name.
Tick.
I have learned that empowering women makes a big difference to the community. I already knew that, but I'm saying it out loud again because I like it. What else did I learn? I really loved Nick going into politics, even though it's like being the Liberal seat for 73 years. I love that. It's a little red hen kind of thing, isn't it? Like, I'll do it myself.
Yeah, that's right. The optimism. I also loved speaking to Marik and being reminded that we really need to say things and get them off our chest before it's too late. So that was a really lovely reminder.
Yeah, it was great. And I'm totally fired up for going along to see the next one as well. Like, what a beautiful room to be in.
Absolutely. What a cracking show. Lovely to spend the morning with you.
It's lovely to spend the morning with you.
Joe Stanley is going to be back next Tuesday, of course, on Broad Radio. And don't forget, you can listen back to this show or any of the past episodes of Broad Radio on the podcast, Broad Radio on the go, wherever you get your podcasts. It's been lovely hanging out. See you later, Broads.